Welcome to the Steelers Realm Podcast. And now, here are the boys of Steelers Realm.
Boom, there it is. Hey, thanks, Andy Hart, for that great introduction. Welcome, Steelers Nation, to another episode. Steelers Realm Podcast. Got a great show for you tonight and a great cast to kick things off. Joining us tonight, my man, T.A. in the big screen.
JT, good evening, sir. How are you tonight?
Not too bad, not too bad. Producers hard at work, man, making us look good on there. And, hey, it's a pleasure. We've been waiting now. He's with us tonight, the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mr. Rob King. Welcome, Rob.
Welcome, guys. Thanks very much for having me on. Appreciate it.
We appreciate your graciousness to join us, man. Talk some Steelers. So eager to find out what's going on in your realm when you're not broadcasting Steelers football. I got some other things going on. Putting that literature degree to work, I hear.
Yeah, I've got a book. Here, I'll show it to you right now. Put it out right now. Boom, right there. Can you see it?
There it is.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm on the phone because I can't figure out how to get my computer to work, which is a problem. TA, I'm not going to throw you under the bus.
It's okay.
I wrote a middle grade fantasy book, first of a trilogy. It's out. It's been out since late November, and I've had a blast writing it, and now I'm marketing it. Not much downtime between Steelers season and Pirate season. I thought I'd just kind of relax, work on editing my second book, and it's been a lot. Marketing a book is a full-time job, but luckily plenty of time for the Steelers going to the combines next week, and then turn the corner and get ready for baseball.
Busy, man. Yeah. When do the pitchers report?
They're already there. I mean, they're working out down there. So I will not be going to spring training, but Hannah Mears is down there, and the broadcast crews are down there. So I'll check in with those guys periodically and be caught up to speed. I love the Pirates hat, Jim. Way to represent.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, man, listen, this is the time of year you dream. They've got a lot of great young pitchers. So, maybe this will be the Buccos' year this year.
That's it. Yeah, if we can get some offense going, we might have something there. It's always fun to watch.
Well, Rob, I got to ask about the book, first of all. Okay. You said you're busy out there promoting it and everything. What is the process in today's age now that Oprah's book club is no longer there at 2:00 for the rest of the world to see? How does a fine young gentleman like yourself get this fantasy novel out there to the little folks?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a woman named Arlen at City Books here in Pittsburgh. And, a lot of people have been helping me out now that I've written it. And she said, look, a lot of authors feel like once they've gotten the book written, almost like giving birth to a child. Like, here it is. It's ready to go. Well, then you got to raise the child, So it's not just about writing it, if Herman Melville had written Moby Dick and put it on a rock on the beach, nobody would have ever read it or heard of it. So you have to be out there marketing. You have to get into books and into schools. And I'm going to work a little bit on the schools now. I'll probably save a lot of that for the fall when the second book comes out, maybe after I clear Pirate season, hopefully deep into October for that. And it's been a lot, and it's been a learning experience. Writing was a learning experience, TA, and now marketing. And I love the writing aspect of it. The marketing part has been interesting, and so far I haven't faltered on it. I've enjoyed it because it's new. Hopefully it'll be a little easier the second time around. I'll have made some contacts and all that, but it's been a learning experience. And when you get a little up there in years, to be able to have a new learning experience that kind of gets you enthusiastic is fun. Much like calling Steelers games did, So it's been a blessing, really. It has.
So for a little plug, I mean, do you have a little book tour already figured out where people can come see you sign? Are you heading into Broadway, New York City? Where can we come get your book and your autograph at?
Well, first of all, if you want to buy the book right now, the easiest place is Amazon, although it's going to be in a lot of local bookstores in Pittsburgh over the coming weeks. So people go to Amazon and search my name and the title of the book, The Door in the Stone. I'll be at Riverstone Books doing a signing in March. At some point, I'm going to be doing a signing in upstate New York, Cooperstown, where I'm from. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to be, maybe in May. I'm doing an event in April at the South Fayette, I think it's a senior center right next to the library. That's part of CCAC's program. So I'm getting out there a little bit. March 21st for Riverstone Books, where we really are plugging a book here, TA. March 21st, Riverstone and McCandless in Pittsburgh. I think there's going to be some food and refreshments, and I'll be signing books and talking a little bit about the book. It's been fun. I've already done one. I got one under my belt, and it's been interesting. Like I said, it's all new stuff for me. It's all very interesting, and it's really been enjoyable. I'm one of those people I'm not suited to sitting around, I mean, I just can't do nothing. Hopefully I can get better at that. It's a goal of mine to get better at doing nothing. But I'm not really very good at it now. So it's been keeping me even busier than I probably should be.
Well, keep rolling while you can.
That's
Rob.
right. That's right.
Keep rolling while you can.
Absolutely.
So now this book reading, was that in New York? Did I see that right?
Yeah, well, you guys are on the ball, man.
Let me guess.
You're
Huntington
digging deep
Library.
for this podcast here. Yeah, it was at Huntington Library in Oneonta, New York. First time I've ever done one, and it was fun. It was it was fairly well attended. I went to another one on Tuesday night here in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Library. A guy named Greg Hurwitz, who has written the Orphan X books and other things, just to see what a real live author who that's his living, what he does at a book reading or a book event. So I did my first one, and it was enjoyable. Again, it was fun to do, and I was happy with the turnout. And I was happy that people purchased the books, and I'm not in this to make a fortune writing books. I just hope that when I was always a big reader. I grew up in the age where you had two choices as a kid. You're outside and playing. When you're inside, you're reading a book. The TV didn't go on. So that's what you did. And so, I've always loved playing sports my entire life. I played small college football. I played pickup basketball till maybe 10 years ago, 3 times a week. Tennis, golf, doesn't matter. I mean, if it's a sport, I'll play it. And I love playing it. But when I was reading, I read sports books, and I read the Hardy Boys books. That's what I read as a kid. And I had a teacher who said, "Hey, listen, you obviously love to read. Try branching out a little bit." And that's what happened. I started reading some fantasy books that we read in school by a guy named Lloyd Alexander. Wrote a series called the Prydain series. C.S. Lewis, Ursula K. Le Guin. Eventually, it's The Hobbit and J.R. Tolkien. But those books really helped turn me into a reader. And so if I can put out a book that, some kids will feel the way I feel about those books. I mean, right behind me, there's a bookshelf behind me. And on that is those books I just talked about, because my family got them to me for a birthday a few years ago, because they still mean something to me. So if I can get a few kids that would mean something or turn them into a reader, I would be extremely gratified. That's what I'm hoping for.
All right. So Rob, now I got to ask, all right.
Yeah.
You brought up the Hardy Boys.
Yeah.
Right? And you said it was either play sports or TV. So back in those days, not to show our age or nothing, that was only 3 channels. So my question is, was it Parker Stevens or Sean Cassidy that you liked better in the TV show than the book?
Wow. Yeah, because that's right. I'd forgotten about, until you mentioned it right now, I'd forgotten that they did a TV series. I read all the books. Not only did I read the books, but the Hardy Boys, there's they always say by Franklin W. Dixon, and I guess I guess it was probably just like a team of writers. There might have been a Franklin W. Dixon, I'm not really sure, but they wrote them. They started writing those in the early 1900s, and so you would go to flea markets and things like that, and if I saw and they did several different versions. There were the their 1970s versions and the 1950s versions and the 1920s versions, And I would have, The Missing Chums, which I think was the second book in the series. I had like 3 different copies of it, that read differently, were of different lengths. I actually kind of like the 50s version. So I'm evading your question because I think he'd probably have to go Parker Stevenson, right? He was Frank. But Joe in the books is a little more interesting. Joe was kind of a hothead, and but I'd forgotten about the series because, like I said, I didn't watch a lot of TV. I was reading the books, but yeah, I watched that short-lived series on TV too when I was a kid.
There you go. Made a couple of people famous for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Now, last question. I'll let JT take over because he knows I get a little long in the mouth sometimes here, especially when we got guests on. But my question is in the book, a little teaser, did you leave an opening for a sequel?
Oh yeah, there's 3 of them. There's the second one's already written, and my goal was between seasons, Steelers season ends, Pirate season picks up, that I would finish editing the second book because I wrote it already. And it's been hard to get to because of the marketing part. And I'm just sort of getting back into it now to make sure that it's going to be out in the fall. So the second book should be out in the fall. One thing I've learned is that these things always take longer than you think they're going to take. But I'm really trying to work against a real deadline and making sure over the next several weeks I get it to a point where I can at least send it out to have some people look at it and say, hey, you got to rewrite this sort of thing, and then spend, then I can just spend a few hours here, a few hours there cleaning it up. And then the third book is only partially written, so I've got to get going on that. But I know how it ends. There's fantasy books out there now where people are waiting for the next books to come. Hey, let's go. Let's get these things out, and they're not out. Well, I know how everything's going to end, and hopefully I'll get to them in a good, timely fashion so that people who have enjoyed the books and I feel grateful that people have enjoyed it so far, that they don't have to wait for books 2 and books 3 because as a reader myself, you want those things to get out in a timely fashion.
Sure, right. Get it while it's hot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
So we've got to buy you a plane ticket then to Arizona to go see Mr. Martin so he can finish up his fantasy series.
Is that where he is now? I thought he was from New Jersey or something.
He is, but he lives in, I think it's New Mexico is where he's camped out now.
Yeah.
They had the HBO series, and I guess they wrote that last novel for him, and that's as good as it's going to get. So I'm glad to hear the ending of yours.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm going to try to get it out and in a timely fashion. I was advised that that's a good thing to do. This isn't J.K. Rowling where, she can wait 2 years and then everyone shows up at midnight like my kids did and go to the midnight party, the midnight book release and all that stuff. And there's a big party at the local bookstore. And I'm just trying to get them out in a timely fashion so people don't forget I've written the first one, So that's a little bit different story.
There you go.
Well, we'll do what we can to promote it too. We'll put
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Certainly.
That was fun.
It certainly does. Sounds like you're passionate about it too.
I am. Yeah. Thanks.
So speaking about passionate, we certainly are passionate about this team, but man, did we get a sour taste these last 4 games. We spent the last several weeks just kind of trying to put it all into place and where we go from there. But curious to get your take before your thoughts moving forward this year. What was your take on the season and how it ended up, Rob?
Well, obviously we all had a different feeling at 10-3 than we did at 10-7, and then with the loss in the playoffs. Yeah. So that's clearly the case. And frankly, I was a little mystified as to what happened. I'm not sure what happened and why it was so precipitous. Although I will say this, and I don't want to sound like a Pollyanna here, but a couple of years ago when the Steelers went into Buffalo in the playoff game, you just felt like, I think a lot of fans felt like so much had to go right for them to win a game up in Buffalo.
Right.
So you had to win the turnover battle 3-0, and Josh Allen had to slip and fall on the ice, and when he was running in for a touchdown, something had to happen. Maybe he had to return a kick for a touchdown. Something had to happen. And, you look back even at those last games, when you think about each game as it came down the pike, Philadelphia, who won the Super Bowl, obviously, in convincing fashion.
Yes.
You're going in to tie the game up in the third quarter in a game in which you've been outplayed. Really, it'd really been outplayed to that point. But you're marching in with a couple minutes left in the third quarter to tie it. right? I mean, you have a chance to tie the game. You're starting to get the momentum going in your direction. It wasn't like you were blown out in Philadelphia. You can look at the final score, but remember what that game looked like. And then, Baltimore, and I think what happened is because you lost 4 in a row and because the score started to get out of hand, you began to think, well, they really got worked. I went back before and Kansas City, after the Jalen Warren touchdown was called back on that dubious holding penalty, which again would have given the Steelers the lead, and maybe you have the lead at the half. That really wasn't a game after that. The Kansas City kind of took control of that one. Yeah. But the game against Baltimore, obviously before the playoff game, I went back and watched that. And I was watching it, and I thought, okay, the way I felt about it is not what I'm watching. Like, because I think the feeling, the emotion gets wrapped up in the 4-game losing streak. Right. I was watching that game. Everything that could have gone wrong in that game went against the Steelers. I mean, the first 3 fumbles, Russell Wilson inside the 5, Baltimore twice would have given the Steelers excellent field position around the 40-yard line. Baltimore gets all the fumbles. They got another fumble later in the game. They got every single break going for them, and yet the Steelers were right in the game. They were right there. They played with them. And I remember watching the game. I remember somebody asking me about it, and my thinking, well, they're going to have to do some things differently to beat the Ravens. That was my thought process. Then I went back and watched the game, and they played with them toe to toe until the very end, and then the Ravens pulled away. I did not see what happened in the playoffs coming. I did not expect that. As I sat down in that booth, I was looking at the other people in the booth, and I thought to myself, I think the Steelers have these games are always close. I think they got a good chance of winning this game. I really, truly believe that. That was the worst of the 5 defeats to me. They were really never in that game. And I don't know, I can't place a finger on why that happened. Maybe if you beat Cincinnati mentally in that final the game of the regular season, maybe mentally you're in a better spot. Well, physically they would have been in Houston, right? They wouldn't have even been in Baltimore, I think.
Right. They would have been.
What's that?
They would have been.
Yeah, they would have been. So, but again, I think all this is a way of saying I think they're closer. I didn't get the feeling like, oh my gosh, what has to go right to win any of these games, like I did the year before. They've had 2 very productive drafts. They had a very productive free agency period. You go out and get Patrick Queen. You go out and get Deshaun Elliott. And keep in mind too that they drafted 7 players, and 4 of those guys got hurt and never played. So that's 4 guys you're going to be kind of adding into the mix this season. I think that the Steelers have a lot of cap room. And I know you said we're going to look forward to a moment, but I think they have a lot of cap room. I think they're closer than they appeared to be at the end of the season. They've obviously got to settle upon a quarterback, but I think that there's some, sort of quietly some reason for optimism for this team to have another productive offseason and be a stronger team heading into 2025.
We certainly were optimistic, even, like you said, at 10-3. But let me take you back to the second Cincinnati game. I was listening to Starkey last week, and he was bringing it up, and he made a good point. It seemed like that we pretty much just dominated Cincinnati that first game, and it seemed like Russell Wilson was really starting to open things up a little bit. He was hitting this, hitting that, moving the ball just in chunks down the field, and then fast forward to game 2 at Cincinnati. And all of a sudden, it's a run and pound type style game, and it's like we almost went the opposite. Did you think Coach outthought himself? Did he second guess himself on that?
Well, something happened with the offense over the last 4 games, and it began in Philadelphia. In that game in Philadelphia, they started the game with 5 consecutive possessions in which they did not get a first down. And so, and again, as I was thinking about this as the season wore on, I was thinking, man, this offense needs to find a way to give the defense a break. Yeah. So in that Cincinnati game, Burrow marches the team down the field. They score a touchdown. The Steelers come out 3 and out. Well, that's not helping out your defense. They began each half against Kansas City, 3 and out, and then another 3 and out. But you can't so I thought, okay, the offense just isn't giving the defense a chance. You need to win time of possession. They were doing that in the 10-3 start. They were the best team in the league at that at one point, deep into the season. And then they weren't very good down the stretch. And I was blaming that mostly on the offense, or thought that was where the blame should be. And then what happened in Baltimore happened. Well, that wasn't the offense. That was the defense. So I just think that I wish I had an answer for you as to what happened. I don't know. I really can't put a finger on it. I was frankly mystified. I did not see that coming. I was excited about that gauntlet of games. I thought the Steelers would show well in that gauntlet of games. And it didn't happen. And I don't know why. I mean, I would be making something up. And I don't want to do that to you guys. If I came up with it, I don't know. I don't know what happened.
One or two of those games would have made entire difference in the way we went into the playoffs too. I mean, one or two of those games.
Well, I would have been interested to see if they that last drive, they marched down, here comes a snap, Waitman with the hold, and Boswell kicks a 54-yarder at the buzzer, and you win it. What would it have scored? But 20-19, right? What would that have meant for would you have felt differently going into the playoffs with a win? I don't know. I wonder if psychologically that was these guys are still human beings, if that was part of the effect. But like I said, it's probably all these things we talk about. It's probably a little bit of everything. But I can't, like I said, I can't place a finger on it because I was surprised. I was surprised about what happened in that last 5 games.
Well, there's been a lot of murmur about the thoughts that Tomlin kind of squashed that whole middle of the field thing, be conservative with it, that don't live in your fears. It seemed like it was more conservative, let the defense, do its thing. There's been a lot of that murmur, as people were trying to, wrap their arms around what happened here. But that point's been brought up several times. And then, of course, we caught that, heard of a little bit of drama between, Wilson and the offensive coordinator. I guess this is the kind of stuff that bubbles up when the season ends like it does. Or do you think there's some credence to that, Rob?
I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, I wish I could. I wish I could tell you. I wish I had something. I wish I had some inside scoop that I could tell Steelers Realm right now and get. This is what happened. I don't. And you're right. Those things happen after a season. When a season is over, there's only one team that's not wondering what happened. Right.
Right.
And so Kansas City's what happened to Kansas City? Why did they get blown out in the Super Bowl? And now, you're going to hear this reason and that reason. And, a source told me. And look, I'm sure a lot of these people reporting these things, maybe they have good sources. I don't want to besmirch anybody who's reporting anything. Again, when you talk about the media in general today, it's hard to know sometimes what is opinion and what is actual factual reporting. So I can't, since I have nothing factual to add, since I don't have, nobody's told me any of the things that have been reported. I can't really comment on them because I don't know the veracity of those things. And again, I'm not trying to besmirch anybody's reputation as a journalist. I just don't have firsthand knowledge of it.
Yeah.
Well, the news
tough to weed that up.
The news has come out on Kansas City. The reason KC lost is Taylor Swift was wearing white and not red.
Oh my, yes, there it is. That could very well have been it. But you know what? That somebody will be saying something like that, right? I mean, somebody's coming up with something. Somehow it's Taylor Swift's fault or whatever. I don't know. Like I said, there's only one team at the end of a season ultimately who's happy. Teams can be pleased. I'm sure the Washington Commanders are pleased with their season. Who saw that coming? Other teams I'm sure are pleased with how their seasons went, but only one team is ever truly happy at the end of it. And that team's, 5 hours, 4.5 hours to the east of us.
Mm-hmm.
The one holding the Lombardi trophy.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I guess my only question is, Rob, and being that you're close to it, that Cincinnati game, that first Cincinnati game, it seemed like the training wheels came off. We put up over 40 points in that game. And it was like, this is what we've been waiting for years from the Steelers, And then it just seemed like we packed all that back up in a box. Like we let it out too soon. Like the jack came out and we stuffed him back in the box and said, that's it. We're not doing it no more.
Yeah. And again, I wish I could tell you why that happened. And, when you think about, and again, one of the reasons I was optimistic about the Baltimore game, they didn't have George Pickens. And let's face it, the Steelers reports were out there, local media, national media, that the Steelers were trying to acquire a big-time wide receiver. I think they knew going in that they wanted to upgrade that position, and that if something happened to George Pickens, they were going to be in a bind. Well, something did happen to George Pickens, right? He missed some time. That put him in a bind. You think about the Baltimore game. Deshaun Elliott didn't play in that game. Dante Jackson got hurt in that game. They had significant injuries, and they had those guys back for Baltimore that didn't play in that game against the Ravens in the regular season. That was another reason why I thought, hey, listen, these guys are going to come back against an opponent that you always play well. You played them better than the score indicated just a few weeks ago. So again, I don't have any answer. I just don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know why it happened. You're right. The offense, Russell Wilson's first game, they went over 400 yards of offense, if I'm not mistaken. Remember, it was like 56 games or something. There's like this maudlin count of, there's 38 games without 400 yards, or there's 47 games without. It was like the Joe DiMaggio hitting streak,
Right.
And then he comes out first game, 400 yards, and we're thinking, okay, here it goes. You got that, and that's going to loosen up defenses. That's going to help your running game. And then, again, those last 4 games. And we can't undersell the quality of opponent. For sure, that had something to do with it. But to me, that can't be the entire explanation, because the Steelers played other good opponents and the offense looked better than it did in those last 4 games.
Absolutely.
To what you had said about George and trying to pick up a receiver, the one thing that we couldn't figure out is why Mike was not utilized more, especially when George went down. We figured this was the prime opportunity for Russ to build a rapport with him. So when George did come back, now we've got that true number 2 wide receiver that everybody claimed we didn't have. I argued the fact that we had Pat Freiermuth, to be honest with you, because if Travis Kelce can be the number 1, why can't Pat be our number 2? We know the guy can catch. We know the guy can run. But my point being is that rapport never seemed to happen with Mike. Was Mike just not happy here, or is Mike beyond his years?
Well, they didn't give up much to get him. So you do wonder, it would seem like the better years in his career behind him. It was a low risk flyer. And I will tell you this too. I'm sure that, there was nobody in the Steelers locker room saying, hey, listen, let's tamp things down and not get the ball to Mike Williams, right? Nobody's saying that. So why it didn't work out, I don't, again, probably a guy that, again, was a low end buy. This wasn't the guy that, that they'd been talking about. They were talking earlier about Brandon Ayuk and Pro Bowl caliber type of receivers. Mike's probably a couple of years removed from that. I thought there'd be more there. There wasn't. And I'm sure it wasn't because they said, we're not going to utilize this guy. It's not like they're not trying to win games and move the ball down the field.
Well, especially since his first pass was a touchdown bomb.
Yeah. It was. What was Tomlin's quote on that? It was pretty tough to get on a moving train.
Yeah. But you'd think a veteran guy like that would be able to do that. And again, when you look at the receiving core, to me, Pat Freiermuth had another solid season. Pickens is a super talented guy, but I think there's the fact that Darnell Washington showed he could be utilized more in the passing game. Calvin Austin. So amidst a season in which they were trying to upgrade that position and weren't able to. There's some reason for optimism, I think, moving forward. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, and again, Roman Wilson. I mean, you spent a 3rd-round pick on this guy. You're expecting him to be a contributor. He never got on the field, and so when you think about what you're going to do with the wide receiver room, rumors that teams might be interested in trading for George Pickens, and what do the Steelers do? Do they pick? Do they reset? Do they try to sign him to an extension? He's going into his last year of eligibility with the team before he can become a free agent. These are interesting decisions that, I think that if I were to guess, I would guess the Steelers are going to try to do something before the draft to shore up the wide receiver position because it was, again, pleased with the way Darnell Washington in particular and Calvin Austin came on, and they look like they can be guys that can help your receiving core. But I think it's still clear that they would like to get a guy that can, and listen, maybe it's a guy that plays with Pickens for a year, and then maybe George moves on, or maybe he's the guy that comes in. And if Pickens is traded, as some have rumored, the rumors maybe he's going to be traded. Well, then now you have to go out and get somebody else, and you have to get him out in the draft. So it's going to be, again, with the cap room and not only the draft coming up, but 4 guys to be able to utilize that didn't play this year because of injury. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Steelers.
Yeah, you were talking about Roman Wilson kind of went the way of Calvin Austin too. Wasn't he?
Right. That's right.
First year. And, it was only until last year where we really saw what he could do.
And this year when he really had an opportunity. I mean, this was the year where they were putting him out wide, and he wasn't just a gadget play guy. I have a lot of respect for Calvin Austin. He's not a big guy, but he's a tough guy. I mean, he'll stick his nose in there. I mean, he just got creamed in that first play against Cincinnati. I mean, I asked him about that after he said he got the wind knocked out of him. Luckily or unluckily, it happened to him before. We were discussing it, and if you've never really had the wind knocked out of you, you feel like you're dying.
Yeah,
it's not a pleasant feeling. He got right up, bounced right back out onto the field. He had a touchdown return on a punt. Scored some touchdowns in the receiving game. Showed he could go out wide. Showed he was tough. Had a terrific catch up the sideline. Was that against Baltimore or Cincinnati? I can't remember. Great catch where he showed showed the ability to get the feet down and bounds on a twirling catch that was a little behind him. To me, I think that, he was used as more of a gadget guy. And, if you're going to play in an Arthur Smith offense and you're a wide receiver, you better be able to block. Well, a lot of that at the NFL level is just willingness. You just need to, by the time, if you stick your nose into somebody, most of the time, by the time, they shuck you off, you've done your job. Even if the guy takes you and throws you into the ground, the effort of doing that means that whoever you're trying to block for is probably already by that guy. And so, he's a willing blocker. And I think he's a guy, again, do I expect him to catch 110 footballs this year? No. But do I expect him to be a contributor and a valuable guy in a receiving core? Yeah, I do. And same thing with Darnell Washington, the tight end position. He was just used as a blocker prior to this year. And he showed that, I wouldn't want to tackle that guy. He's enormous. No. Holy mackerel. You stand next to Darnell Washington in the locker room, you're like, oh, my goodness.
I know. We were down at Friday Night Lights.
Guy.
Yeah, Friday Night Lights, and we saw like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's an enormous human being.
A giant among boys.
The very first completion, when Russ finally came in, it was to him.
Yeah. And that little rollout.
Yeah.
And again, the team seemed to that seemed to be a little less effective as the season went on.
Right.
But again, he's a guy that can block. He's a guy that can catch. So, you don't want to be limited as an offensive play caller. Hey, Calvin Austin's out there, so therefore it's going to be a Jets.
We
lost Rob there for a second.
We lost Rob.
Yeah.
He was bringing up some very good points. I was kind of wanting to see what his take was on Connor as well, and how he seemed to have disappeared in Arthur's offense. So hopefully he jumps back on so we can ask him that.
His battery might have died or something too. So we'll give him a minute, and we'll keep that thought rolling there. Go ahead, TA. Just keep that thought rolling. You
Keep that thought rolling. Is that where
there
we're at?
he's back. All
Hey,
right.
am I back? There we
He's
go.
back.
There
Hey,
we
There
guys.
you go. Well, we were just saying we were hoping you were coming back because I actually wanted to hear your thought on why it seemed like Connor kind of disappeared a little bit in Arthur's offense. Because the one thing that we said all year is even though we didn't have a true number two, there was no undeniable that we have talent on this offense of side of the ball between Jalen, Najee, Connor, Washington, Pat Fryermuth, Van Jefferson, even you want to throw him in there, Calvin Austin, George Pickens.
Patterson.
I mean, the Patterson,
Patterson.
yeah, the list goes on. We had the weapons. It just seemed like we couldn't get it together to put some kind of offensive flow to make it all work.
I think every guy you just mentioned is a good football player. Connor Hayward's a good football player.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, irrespective of position, this guy's just a good football player. So how do you utilize these guys best? Well, that's, you're trying to figure that out. The Steelers kept 4 tight ends on the roster. You're obviously not going to have a ton of 4 tight end sets out there. So that's going to diminish what you can do a little bit when you got 4 tight ends and you're one of the 4, and your name's not Fryermuth and your name's not Darnell. Pruitt and Hayward are fighting for snaps. I think what the offense, one of the things that the offense would like to get is more playmakers, more burst, and whether that is out of the running back position. And again, when you talk about the offense, Jalen Warren, he was a guy that wasn't around at the beginning of the season. He had the injuries. He got on that moving train, Jim, that you talked about, and looked to be peaking as the season wore on. I was excited about it. Again, as we went into that stretch of games, I thought there was reasons for the Steelers to be optimistic. But when you look at, the Eagles, for example, there's a lot of things to like about the Eagles, who just obviously won the championship. Saquon Barkley didn't have a huge Super Bowl, but he has to be accounted for because he can take a handoff and go 90 yards. So can Derrick Henry, by the way. Both their wide receivers are that way. You get a ball to Brown or you get a ball to Smith, and they could be gone. They could be going for 70 yards. The Steelers don't have a lot of that kind of playmaking speed. Look at the Lions. They've got playmakers all over the place, speed all over the place. I think that what's that?
St. Brown.
Yeah,
that guy is something else.
And both running backs. Running backs can take a pitch and go 90 yards on you. So I think that I suspect the Steelers will be looking for a little more burst. And when you've got burst, that is going to play well with pounding. Pounding helps burst. Burst helps pounding. If you have guys that can run and make big plays, that's going to loosen up the opposing defense, and then you can pound it at them. And then when they try to tighten things up because you're pounding at them, now you have guys that can beat you on the edge. And that's what we see a lot in the game. And I think the other thing, obviously the Eagles have a lot of that talent. They just won the Super Bowl. The other thing they have is really, really good big people.
Yeah.
And the Steelers have started to do that on the offensive line. And again, we talk about how you want to play. You go out and you spend a first-round pick on Troy Fautanu, and Fautanu earns the start. He is going to be your starting right tackle on opening day, and you lose him for the year. That's a hard blow. James Daniels, you lose him for the year. I thought Mason McCormick came in and did a really nice job.
He did.
But that's a lot to ask of a lot of young guys. I suspect that offensive line with Fautanu in there and these young guys having another year under their belt, or that first year under the belt, is going to improve. So, do you think now about that defensive line? The Eagles, I was shocked when they said, they didn't blitz once in the Super Bowl. That 4-man front just dominated up front.
Created havoc, yeah.
And, Cam Hayward had a great year. Can you find some more guys in the middle with Keanu Benton and Cam? Logan Lee, is he a guy that could potentially be a good rotational defensive lineman? We don't know because you drafted him and he got hurt and he didn't play all year. So again, I go back to some of the things that the Steelers need and some of the things. I mean, they're basically going to have all their draft picks and like 4 more picks. And that's even better because those 4 picks are now acclimated to the system, and at least they've been through an offseason, and they've sat through meetings and that sort of thing. So, getting big up front on defense and maybe getting some speed on offense. But again, you also have to figure out the quarterback position, and that's it's a hard league to win, and if you don't feel really good about your quarterback.
Right. Well, definitely want to dig into that for a second. But you were talking about burst, and that's what his first game back. Jalen Warren, he was finding his way back by the second game. Then you started to see that burst again. Najee seems like not so much. Early on in the season, you saw that burst, but like it seemed like he turned into like a Le'Veon Bell kind of try to find here, and then get your burst. So now we didn't pick up his 5th-year option, free agent. What do you see happening with Najee?
I thought the door was closed, but there have been reports that the door might not be closed. So that'll be interesting. Now it is it's supposedly, and again, I'm digging into the draft. I'll be at the combines next week. Supposedly an extremely deep draft at the running back position. There are two, if you think about needs on the Steelers team, and I don't think there's a ton of them. Some of those will be addressed in free agency. Quarterback, maybe receiver, but this is supposed to be a great draft for running backs, and this is supposed to be a great draft for defensive linemen. And if you're a Steelers fan, I think that's good news because I think you can, if you handle some of the other issues in free agency, you can go into that draft and maybe find some guys at those positions that can help immediately. So I don't know what they'll do with Najee. Najee's a sledgehammer, and again, you have to have holes too to run through, and maybe those holes diminished. Maybe they were being defended in different ways. I remind people all the time. I was working in St. Louis, a young reporter. They had a running back they thought was washed up. Couldn't find any holes. Wasn't running decisively. What's going on with this guy? And they traded him to the Steelers, and now he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the story. Where I remember the coach saying, "Hey, Jerome, if there's not a hole, just slam it up in there." And Jerome came in. He was the next guy at the press conference. He goes, "What does that mean? Am I supposed to run into the back of my offensive lineman? What does that mean, slam it up in there?" You got to have some holes too. So again, and did I break down? I don't. It's funny, and I've told this to people too. Calling the game, I see it differently than I see it as a fan. And by the way, my wife can attest to the fact that I'm not that much fun to watch a game with because I'll pause the TV and I'll be like, "Hey, look, I think they're creeping into they're going to rotate into a cover 3 here, honey." And she's just like, "Oh, come on, let's just watch the game." But when I'm calling the game, I have to follow the ball. And so I'm not looking at the wider. I mean, I can look within the line and I can glance around and see what kind of defense they're in. But it's a different way of watching the game than I would as a fan. So I can't definitively say why the running back, the running game diminished down the stretch, but it did diminish down the stretch.
Well, I think you hit upon that. I mean, by the time the season got to the end, we had a patched up line. And even though, as you've already said, Mason did a great job. Even Spencer Anderson, you can't forget him. He did a great job. And, but then you look at, again, Nate Herbig. He's been on the team now for 2 years, and we haven't seen anything that we were hoping to get production out of him. And it's just been unfortunate the way our luck has fallen. But I like what you said about the defensive tackle in the first round, because I've said it for the last 2 years, where the Steelers need to get back to is building in the trenches. At one team, we used to brag that our offensive line, if you weren't a first-round pick, you were a second-round pick. And if you were a third-round pick, you were lucky if you were on the practice squad, because that's the kind of pride we took in our offensive line. It looks like we're starting to get back to that, and I think that's key, is dominating those trenches, which we have just been terrible at over the course of the last 5-6 years.
Well, Matt Williamson had a really good stat. And he said when Cam Hayward was on the field, the Steelers allowed 3.7 yards per carry. That's second best in the league. Cam's getting up there in years. He's not going to play 99% of the snaps. Right. When he wasn't on the field, which was about maybe a quarter of the snaps, something like that, the Steelers' run defense gave up 5.1 yards per carry. That would have ranked 31st in the league. So, yes, they need to find other guys that can step in there and stop the run when Cam's not on the field. Now, ideally, one of these guys that they really love is there and available in the first round. When you look at what they've done the last couple of years in the draft, hey, have at it, guys, because they've had two very productive drafts. Now we're extrapolating a little bit because last year, 4 year 7 guys got hurt. But the draft from the year before, not only are all those guys on the team, they're all contributing. You just mentioned Spencer Anderson. He was the last guy. He was the last round pick for the Steelers, and he was starting games for him this year. So, I do think that the Steelers have always done a wonderful job, going back to Kevin Colbert, of at least finding a way in free agency to come up with plausible starters, or starters that were a little bit better than what you gave up, allowing you in free agency the luxury of not having to draft for a particular position, but to have 3 or 4 different positions in mind. And so if a great player falls to you, you take them. And that's, when you're not boxed into having to get that. I mean, think about, I've seen some of these things. Hey, the Steelers could have drafted Jalen Hurts instead of Chase Claypool.
Yeah, right.
Well, how many teams would like to say, hey, I'd like to have a do-over and take Cam Hayward, or I'd like to have a do-over and take TJ Watt.
Yeah.
Where does TJ Watt go in that draft? First or second? Right? Not 30th or wherever he went with the Steelers. So, I mean, a lot of that, we can revise history all we want. The Steelers have done, I think that's one of the things the Steelers do really well, because they want to build through the draft. They go out and get guys that could fill positions, and then they draft guys that, okay, so you fill the position X, and now in the first round, here's a guy we can take. He's better than this guy we just signed. So what? Take him. When you're boxed into saying, so I agree with you. I'd love to see one of these big defensive linemen come to the Steelers. But if they have a falling off point where they say, hey, listen, after the top 3, 4 through 12 are the same, and we can get these guys in round 2 or 3, then you pivot and go somewhere else in round 1. I agree with what you're saying.
Right.
I'd like to see him draft a defensive lineman, maybe 2 in this draft. I wouldn't be upset at all with 2 defensive linemen. No. I'm worried that everyone's going to look at Philadelphia, and now defensive linemen are going to start scooting up the draft charts too.
Them and offensive linemen, they're looking at 6'6", 330 pounds. Bring them on.
Right, yeah. Nothing wrong with that size. That's a good size.
Right.
Well, let's talk quarterback here. A lot of room.
We have a problem with quarterback, JT.
Yeah. Just can't. I think we've turned into a journeyman quarterback, the place where they come to die here in Pittsburgh. But we got 2 of these guys at bargain basement deals, 2 different quarterbacks going in different times in their career. Now where do we pick it up? I think, a lot of the buzz is about, let's just sign Justin. Let's look forward. Maybe there are other quarterbacks people have their eyes on coming up, not in 25 draft, but the 26 draft. And, let's focus elsewhere. So what are your thoughts? You've talked to Art, you've interviewed Art, and, what are your thoughts on the team moving forward with the quarterback position? Or is it a pretty murky situation yet?
Yeah, it is a murky situation. Russell Wilson looked like a no-brainer when the team was 10-3, right? And then, so you have to ascertain, as I look at the 2 quarterbacks, there's 2 things you have to ascertain, one for each guy. You have to ascertain for Russell Wilson, what happened down the stretch? Why did we see that down the stretch? What would change from what we saw in those last 4 games and in the playoff game? How do we roll back the clock and see what we saw when he stepped in after Justin's start, and what was the team 6-1 in his first 7 games, I believe. How do we need to do that, and can we do that? Is there something internal that we know can be fixed? Is there something we're not hearing about? Were they unhappy with pass protection? Were they unhappy with the running game? Are there extenuating circumstances with Russell Wilson? That's what you have to figure out there. Because, the one word I kept using with him after watching him in camp, watching him in OTAs, everything was crisp. Obviously, he got hurt at the beginning of the year, but the ball came out of his hand crisply. His decision-making was crisp. The way he got in and out of the huddle was crisp. So is there something internally that you can do to get back to that? So that's the Russell Wilson question. For me, the Justin Fields question is, you got a chance to see him over 6 games, but then you also are working with him in practice. This guy went 11th overall in the draft. So, and I think there were a lot of people that felt like there were some bad habits he'd gotten into, things that had to be undone, footwork-wise. We heard the talk earlier in the year about, moving in the pocket with the footwork and these sort of things. did he make enough headway? Did you see enough in the 6 games and then in practice? Did that continuation happen? Was he continuing to ramp upward in practice? Well, that's something I can't answer, right? Only the Steelers can answer that. So that's the big question for me with Justin Fields. You know what the upside is. I mean, just think about some of the things we saw him do running the football. Think about that throw he made scrambling. The play was called back to Pickens down the right sideline in Denver. I mean, a quarterback can't throw a ball any better than that and show more arm strength and arm talent than he did on that one particular play. Can you capture that consistently? That's the evaluation process for Justin Fields. So the team has answers internally, or think they have answers internally, and I think that those are the questions that it's hard for us to know, that aren't in the locker room and aren't in the coaches' meetings. But I think those would be the 2 questions for each guy before you make the decision on which one you move forward with.
Well, without naming names, do you see one of them staying?
Well, that's what Art Rudy said. He said he thought they would, keep one of them, and I think that the plan was to keep. He said that last year too, and I think the plan was to keep Pickens and not Rudolph. And then, evidently Pickens was not happy with the way things went down with the signing, so they wound up trading him. I believe they'll keep one of them. I don't know which one they'll keep. I also think that they're trying to improve other positions on the roster and do it quickly. They've been more aggressive in recent years. They just signed Patrick Queen, I believe was the richest free agent contract in team history. They've got some cap space. I don't think they want to tie it all up in either quarterback. So that could be a factor as well. But I do expect one of those guys will be back with the Steelers this season.
Do you see them picking up another journeyman quarterback?
Great question, because all of them are gone, right? Kyle Allen's gone. He was your third quarterback, and a nice third quarterback to have, right? Came in, one pass, Pat Freiermuth. Good job, Kyle Allen. So you have to fill 2 holes on this team. Will they get? I suspect that they'll sign one of these guys. They'll get a veteran, and that they will perhaps, think about taking somebody at the quarterback position in the draft, somebody that you think maybe later in the draft has some upside and maybe some potential talent, and perhaps sign a guy. Otherwise, you have to go out after the draft and get a third quarterback to fill out your quarterback room.
Who would you like for a late round draft pick, quarterback position?
Me?
Yep.
Oh, I don't. I mean, guys are. So I saw a mock draft today, and the Steelers. They had the Steelers. I'm sorry, the name is escaping me. They had a Steelers drafting a quarterback, 21st overall, and they had him ranked as, I believe, the 78th best prospect in the draft. Said, well, the Steelers have to just keep taking flyers on quarterbacks. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't. I don't think that they're. I don't think they're going to be taking flyers at the quarterback position. A late round flyer, yes. Who that would be? Oh, I don't know. Let me get to the combines and see the guys work, and then maybe I'll have a better answer for you.
Yeah, I know the one that they keep saying is Jalen Milroe, and quite honestly, watching him play at Alabama, I just don't think he's the caliber that we're looking for on the team. But for poise and a sleeper, and I'm hoping he really has a bad combine, is Will Howard. Watching him play at Ohio State this year, I know we have another one, Justin Fields, that played at Ohio State, but I really like the way that kid remains cool, calm, and collective, even under pressure. And it showed throughout the season that he was able to manage games, but when the playoffs came after that Michigan game, he really bounced back and took that team under his wing, and he started almost a Brett Favre gunslinging and could read that defense. And I think that's where Justin struggles, is reading defenses from pre-snap. And I think if he can fix that, it fixes his feet problem and some of those bad habits.
Well, that could very well be, because there's nothing worse than being indecisive as a quarterback. Nothing worse. And now it affects everything you're trying to do. And so when you're playing with confidence, and I mean, you see these. You see the guys, the veteran quarterbacks, and a lot of teams have to scheme around younger quarterbacks, as TA. But you see these veteran quarterbacks; they know what they're going to do with the ball. I mean, guys they're laughing inside their helmet. They know what they're going to do. They can play with confidence, and that gets everything rolling in the right direction. I think that's a great point. But I also think that even if a guy like that, you feel like, okay, does he have number one upside? Maybe. But we think the intangibles are enough that he could be a really good number two. And a really good number two is a valuable thing because, it's hard to win a Super Bowl with a number two. So that's, maybe a lot to ask. But if you can groom a number two quarterback who comes in when your guy gets hurt, think about the years when Charlie Batch came in. Where are you if you're the Steelers and your backup isn't of the caliber of Charlie Batch and he's not winning you games until Ben comes back? And now Ben comes back
Nick
and you got a
Foles.
Hall of Famer quarterback and a chance to win the Super Bowl. So, if you go 0-4 when Ben's out because you don't have a good backup quarterback, your season's gone. So it's a valuable, people think, oh, well, listen, that's a valuable position to have a good number two at. And going back to what Jim said earlier, they're going to have to bring somebody in that they think can help them win games. I really think they thought a couple of years ago that hurt them. Not having that veteran quarterback that they could lean on to come in and win games for them.
Yeah. Right. Oh man. So let's see.
Where do we go from here? We've talked about it all, guys. We've talked about books. We've talked about Steelers. We've talked about Cooperstown. Yeah.
Even got a little Pirates in with the Pirates hat on.
Yeah.
Well, I do got a question now, okay?
Okay.
Now, TA plays a little vintage baseball. All right. Now, you said you used to have pickup games. And I know you used to swing the stick. So we play vintage baseball, 1860 rules, bare hands. Love to see you come out and play every once in a while with us, Rob. Well, actually, there's a good team, Addison Mountain Stars over there in California, PA. Good group of guys. I could get you on that team and
little town ball. Basketball I played, not baseball.
I know it was basketball, but baseball's a little easier on the knees as you get older.
It is, man.
You see what I'm saying? That's you got to graduate to the next step. You're not ready for the rocking chair yet.
No, that going up the steps one at a time was pretty much what did it for me. Thump, 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 thump on the step. That was it. That kind of was a death knell for basketball. But sounds like fun, little town ball. Get out there without the gloves, old school.
That's it, little old school. So keep that in mind. We'll get you out there on the field.
I'll keep it in mind. Hey guys, thanks for having me on today. This was a blast. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, we appreciate you taking time, Rob. Hey, before you go, can we get you to do a plug for us?
What's that plug?
You
plug for Steelers Realm podcast.
Hey, this is the worst podcast ever.
Watch my friends Jim. Well, let me do that again. I'm going to do it again because I want it to be clean. You ready?
Hold on.
Watch my friends Jim and TA. Watch Jim and TA on Steelers Realm. You won't be sorry you did.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a great night, huh?
All right.
You as well, man. Sir.
Good luck.
Take care.
Thank you.
And we'll be looking for book number 2.
You got it. Coming out in September. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the plug, too. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys.
Sir. Take care.
All right. We'll see you, Rob.
Well, man, that was pretty awesome, JT.
That was awesome. What a great
That was a lot of good insight. And you know what? The one thing we didn't get to talk about, and hopefully he'll come back and listen to the show, is, the Rooneys did a great job in making sure that they did what they needed to do to follow up on the voice of baseball. And you couldn't have picked a nicer guy who embellishes the Pittsburgh city feel, market, just even though he is from Cooperstown, New York.
He just embodies Pittsburgh, man.
He does.
And I put this visor on specifically for that too, because I know he loved his job with the Pirates and even with the Penguins. I mean, he's a Pittsburgh guy. We've been fortunate, man. We had Paul Alexander on, Jim Rooney on, and now Rob King, the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We are definitely blessed and feeling it tonight. Appreciate you, producer. Thanks for running the show in the background. TA, pleasure as always. Steelers Nation, careful in the hot tub, guys. Thanks for joining us as always. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.
Adios, Steelers Nation.
Check back next week into the Steelers realm.